Hello, my name is Slava. I'm part of the Eterna team, specifically working with the community. And today I am talking about Chimera. Specifically, the program I'll be showing is ChimeraX. They are both very similar programs. I have used both. And I'm going to be talking about how we can use these freely available programs to visualize 3D RNA structures. So first question that pops up in my mind is, okay, why should I care about 3D RNA structures? I can design 2D structures in Eterna. Why do I necessarily need, these other outside tools to look at structures? And the thing is, you don't have to look at 3D structures to design Eterna. You might be able to, get a lot of information from, different plots and things. But sometimes you might come across something maybe something in real life that just doesn't quite make sense. And maybe you just need to go in there and look at the 3D structure and try to understand what might be going on in that odd case. So as a motivator case, I'll talk about something that I came across when I was looking through the Eterna wiki. So on the wiki, I came across this blog post by Eterna player Nando. I think the blog post was made back in 2013 or something. And basically Nando, in the story that he proposed is that he was going about his day, and then he saw this in a real life RNA structure. And what's going on here is that there was a GC paired in some stack in some real life RNA. A couple down, there was an AU paired also in a stack in a real RNA, but there was a G and a C in between in that internal loop that weren't bonding. And that from an Eterna player's perspective is quite puzzling, because if the sides next to a G and a C are pairing, we would definitely expect that G and C to pair within Eterna. But obviously that wasn't happening in this real life structure. So what exactly is going on? And long story short, Nando saw that if you looked at the 3D view, then you could see that basically the bases, instead of being nicely lined up with each other, one of them was tilted kind of funny. I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yes. So this C over here, instead of being lined up with the G, what was kind of tilted, and thus that's basically why it wasn't pairing with across that loop. So seeing someone else's 3D structures is great. How can I look at some of these structures myself? There are actually a large number of 3D viewing programs available. Lots of them are free to use. Today I will be showing ChimeraX, which is very similar to Chimera. Both of them are from the University of California, San Francisco, and both of them are free. And I wanted to show that we can replicate someone else's example, and then we can, later on, for our own systems, use what we learn from replicating this example to examine those 3D structures. So firstly, I've provided the links for the downloads for both ChimeraX or Chimera. Basically, ChimeraX is the version that's kept up to date. Chimera was developed up to a point, and I think they're not doing updates to it anymore. So that's why I chose to present ChimeraX for today. And then my recommendation is use the production release listed for your operating system. If that happens not work, you can try using a previously released version, but this has worked well thus far for me. This page also links to additional pages and tutorials provided by the people who make ChimeraX. Here it's in my screenshot, it's beneath the features tab. So now, as far as finding a 3D file, there are lots of websites and ways that you can obtain a 3D file. For this particular example, Nando had said in the blog post, all of these words regarding what structure he was looking at in this example. So just to break this down a tiny bit, PDB is a type of 3D structure format. It's also possible that you might see these .cif files. Both of these are 3D files that should load within ChimeraX. And then if we look at some of the other things he said, this 3J2A, that is a unique identifier that we can use to find the 3D file. And then the rest of this information, residue 744, residue is just another name for what in Eterna we call a base. So we can think of this as, oh, okay, I'm trying to find base number 744. Here, the chain n bit turns out to not matter to us. Sometimes there is a structure file with a lot of different pieces to it. So in theory, there could be a very complicated structure file, but here it's actually relatively simple once we find it. So to find this PDB file, I found this on the website that hosts a lot of PDBs. I typed 3J2A into this search bar over here. And then that popped up the structure that Nando was originally looking at. There are lots of ways that you can interact with this structure on the website itself. You can see the overall 3D view. You can see the paper that it originally came from. And here, the download files, that's where I can get the file and then load it into my own program. So click download files, then click PDB format. And then once you actually have ChimeraX open, you can click this open page here and choose the PDB file, and it will load it. This is great. This is exactly what it looked like when I first loaded it. So what I did is I, adjusted the screen size, zoomed in a bit so I could actually see the structure. And that's, what it looks like right when you load it in. Cool. Except right now, the visuals, it's a lot to look at, right? I'm trying to find this specific base. How can I find this specific base in this big, giant jumble of things? There are a lot of different visual options that you can do to better interpret the 3D structure depending on what sort of thing you're trying to understand. So sometimes you might want to see literally all of the atoms in the structure, and there are options to do so. Sometimes you want to see the surface of a structure, and there are options to do so. Lots of the basic options are shown in this home tab up here. However, there are, as you can see, there are also different subtabs, for example, molecule display, nucleotides, graphics, and all of these different ones have additional options for how you can adjust the visuals to fit your needs. And I highly recommend experimenting with all of the different visual options and seeing, what looks fun and what works for you. A good place to start is actually this presets menu up here. It gives you a good idea of the sort of variety that you can view the 3D structures in. So as an example, when I clicked the nucleotides menu up at the top, these are all the different styles in which you could view the different bases. And I just chose, one of them because to me it looked cooler. But as you can see, there are lots of different ones. Then the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to add color to match Eterna. However, if we look closely at these colors, they do not match Eterna, and that's very confusing to me. So there is a way to do custom coloring. So instead of clicking, this button, which would color the different bases except in this color scheme, you can go and open up a color menu, and it will pull up this. Do not click the by nucleotide type or anything. That will just do the wrong coloring that I stated earlier. Instead, what you want to do is if you go to this select menu up here, it has a drop-down list of options, and there are different levels that you can select at. For example, you can select residues. Remember that residue is just a number name, a different name for base. So you can select all of the A's in the structure or all of the C's, and so on and so forth. So you select what you want, you click on the color you want, and they should all change that color. And then you repeat that process until all of the bases are colored as you'd like. And then my personal recommendation is after you're done doing that, make sure to unselect everything just so you don't accidentally, change any additional colors beyond what you are intending. And when I go through that entire process, here's what I end up with. And yes, it's very brightly colored and such, but for my purposes, it helps me know which bases are where. So that's what I needed to do for this. And you can confirm that the colors now match. For example, if within Chimera X, if I hovered over a red one, it should now say, the number of the base, and then also G to match what it is in Eterna. So now I want to give a little bit of introduction on using the command line. So I knew that I wanted to find a specific base. If I wanted to, I could totally find it by hand. I can hover over each individual base and follow along the sequence until I find base number 744. But that is a lot of work. So I wanted to try and figure out a way that I could, zoom in on that part of the structure. So what is a command line? A command line is basically where you can, instead of using these different menus and stuff that I've been using, I can type in text here at the bottom, hit enter, and then it will carry out that particular action. And one nice thing about Chimera X is as you're doing things throughout the menus, it tells you exactly also what you're doing in this log over here. So if you do, for example, coloring a particular thing, it will tell you, hey, this is the command that you could type in and do that same exact thing. And it's also really nice to have this in case you accidentally do something. You can go back through and see, okay, what are the steps that I used exactly to get to where I am. Yes. And one useful command that I always like having on hand is undo. It, in theory, reverses the previous action. I think there are certain things that it doesn't work for, though. So I recommend using a little bit of caution before you do anything, super out there. You might want to look up the documentation on what exactly undo can or can't do. But, if I do something and I want to reverse it, that's my first go-to. Right, so to find the specific base that I'm looking for, 744, this is what I would type into the command line in order to select that base. So SEL is short for select. You can also just type out the word select if you'd like. And then :744. The colon is the notation that Chimera X uses to tell us, hey, I want to look for residue number 744. In our case, it's a base. In other structures, for example, proteins, it would be, the protein analogy to the bases we're looking at. So if I do that, then it should select base number 744. However, what that does is it highlights base 744 in the structure. It's still too complicated for me to visually see where that is within the structure. So what I did is I went up into this top menu again, and I clicked select, and then this zone contacts menu. My idea was that I wanted to see everything within a particular bubble around the base that I was looking at, and nothing else. So as you can see, there are different options for whatever you have currently selected. You can choose things that are either closer to, like, within a bubble close to that, or you can select things that are farther away from that, from a particular distance away. As far as what numbers you might want to put into here, you kind of, well, for me, I was doing trial and error to see, okay, how much should I take away from the structure in order to find the little part I wanted to focus on. All right, so what I did is I selected everything away outside of this little bubble that I was looking at. I used 10 angstroms, and I selected it and then I deleted it. This was the command in the command line. It's definitely not the most elegant option, but it worked for what I'm doing. If you are not wanting to delete that part of the structure, and you want to, I don't know, make it everything else transparent, or something along those lines, I encourage you to try and figure out how to do that. However, when I went in and did a naive approach of, hey, setting the transparency to a particular amount, I believe it did it just for the backbone, the outside of the structure, and not the inside bits. So that's something that you can play around with. For now, I just chose to delete it just so I can focus on this little bubble that I wanted to look at. And it turned out pretty well. Basically, once I deleted everything outside of that particular bubble, these were all the bases that I had left. And then from there, I was able to visually find which bases I was looking at. And after rotating the screen around a bit. And as you can see, these are the ones that matched what Nando had looked at, a G facing somewhere, and then a C that's tilted and tilted it away from that G. All right. And then finally, I wanted to look at what the predicted hydrogen bonds are. Hydrogen bonding, in case you're not familiar with it, is the chemical interaction that basically causes the base pairing within RNA. And it also causes other things, but it's important for base pairing. So I wanted to see where the hydrogen bonds are in the structure. It occurs when electronegative atoms such as oxygen or nitrogen interact with a hydrogen nearby. And you can visualize these interactions within ChimeraX. It's a very simple command. If you type H bond into the command line, then some hydrogen bonds pop up. So this is before I typed the command. This is after I typed the command. And if you look closely and compare the different ones, you can see, oh, for example, this adenine is having some hydrogen bonds off, other bases having hydrogen bonds. And notably, the G and the C do not have hydrogen bonds to each other. So, here I can explicitly show that these G and C do not pair together because they don't have the right configuration in order to hydrogen bond to each other. So therefore, they are not pairing. So I've accomplished my mission that I wanted to do for Nando's example. And we've also learned some of the basics of how to use ChimeraX, visual settings, command line, looking at a particular zone and visualizing hydrogen bonds. And then I realized that there was one more thing that I could have done that could have made the journey slightly easier, which is adding labels. So there is in the drop-down menus a nice way of getting labels, and you can, there are lots of different options for setting up labels. The one that I personally like is one where it gives both the name and the number. So basically the position and the identity of the base. And it's good to confirm, after I did all of this process, that yes, 744 is the C that I was indeed looking for. All right. Finally, I would like to acknowledge and provide these guides for Chimera and or ChimeraX. There have been very good prior guides written by various players. Links are here. There are also various bits of documentation that are provided by ChimeraX that are useful. Quick Start Guide is basically a little mini tutorial. Command lines target specification documentation. So for in our case, when we wanted base number 744, we did :744. Depending on how complex the structural file is, for example, suppose there was one with multiple RNAs in it, instead of just saying base number 744, we might need to specify more in the command line because, 744, well, does it refer to this RNA or that RNA, right? So if you are dealing with complicated structures, or if you want to do, things beyond looking for specific bases, for example, highlighting individual atoms and such, then I recommend, looking at this documentation in particular, combined with some of the other documentation provided for that. And with that, I'll leave it open to questions. And also during this question and answer session, if you want to see anything directly within Chimera, I also have that window open if you want any, if you want to test anything live, basically.
Thank you, Slava.
Right. Yes, and I'm just now catching up with the chat, so yes.
So, Ome, you had a couple suggestions?
Well, there are other commands that I find very useful. For example, rather than actually deleting things, you can simply just choose not to display them.
Oh, interesting. What's the command for that? So that's different than, deleting, and it's different than making it transparent. So there's one just for, whether I want to display something or not.
Right.
Okay.
There are actually two versions, and I have to just say thank you so much for
Yes.
making me aware of ChimeraX because
Yes.
I hadn't stumbled across that, and I'm sure. I mean, the UI is clearly going to be much more user friendly, and I'm not. But I'm eager to find out what other things. So it's possible that whatever I say may not be entirely true anymore. But there are. So you can. There are actually two commands that are useful for showing something specific, show and display, and the difference is that one of them adds basis that you're to what you can see, whereas the other merely shifts, so it can deselect or hide other things all in one command. But I forgot. I've lost my train of thought. Those are more useful because you can undo them, and you can. I mean, making actual changes is awkward because those are gone. The things you're not looking at are gone, and assuming you want to do more than one kind of detailed investigation. Anyway. And the focus command just will zoom in without making any change. We'll just zoom in on a particular base or series of bases, and so that's also very useful.
Astromon is asking for links, and maybe in the next break I'll start a forum thread for slideshows, and Slava can post her slide deck there, and then that'll have I assume that has the links in it.
All right. So multiple things. Firstly, here are the slides, and yes, I will. They can also go in the forum thread. One other thing I wanted to do a shout out to is the Eterna wiki. I don't know if everyone's heard, but recently it was new and updated. So all of the info should be transferred over. There are still some cases of some images and such going missing and stuff. But now is a good time if anyone is interested to come in and start editing the wiki. So this does not require any prior editing experience and such, but hopefully we will be holding a hackathon in August or so. And basically this hackathon will aim to teach people, okay, what are the basics of editing the wiki? And if you already have a wiki editing experience, starting to go in and edit some of the different details on the Eterna wiki. Lots of the things that are currently missing on the wiki are things that we've especially done in recent years. So for example, a lot of information about open vaccine, a lot of information about our recent publications. Those are all things that people can help to put on the website. So if anyone is interested, I have made a quick Google form to gauge interest, and basically exact scheduling we can figure out later, but hopefully sometime in August. If you're interested, fill out the form, provide your player name, and if you prefer to be contacted by email, provide your email. Otherwise, I'll just message you within the Eterna system. But anyone who's interested in learning how to use the wiki, even if it's just something as small as creating a profile page on the wiki and learning how to use text and links on the wiki, I do recommend that. So yes, I shared the link to that forum in the chat.
All right, any final questions or thoughts from anyone? All right, we will take a quick 3-minute break, and we'll be back at the top of the hour.